I'm Elizabeth at Literary Princess, and today I am doing my July wrap-up. So I read 8 books this month, and 4 of them were for Jane Austen July. I had planned to read way more for Jane Austen July, but things happened. I was on my honeymoon. I didn't finish a lot of the stuff from my June TBR. And then some books took me longer. But I still read 8 books this month, so that's pretty good. So let's jump right in. First up was Between Men, English Literature and Male Homosocial Desire by Eve Sedgwick. So this is for my feminist theory list for my qualifying exams. It is an important piece of queer theory, and it was okay. I gave it 2.5 stars. I wasn't enraptured with it, but I can see why it's important. So Sedgwick in this looks at how basically the love triangle of one woman and 2 men is actually a setup to portray homosocial desire between the 2 men. I honestly just didn't find some of her readings very convincing, like particularly some of Victorian stuff. I think there's books that portray the homosocial and the homosexual way better than some of the ones she picked. So she starts with, I believe she starts looking at Shakespeare's sonnets, and then she goes up to the Victorian novel. So it was fine. It was dense, as theory usually is. I just didn't find it especially convincing, but she definitely had some great ideas in there. So 2.5 stars. Next up was, and this came as a result of me being on my honeymoon and being like, I just want to read something fun. So I don't usually read romance, like contemporary romance. I'll read classic romances. Jane Austen is considered romance, but it's also social satire. So regular contemporary romance, I don't usually pick up. I tend to not like it, but I was just in the mood. So I picked up Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is about a writer named January, which is a ridiculous name. I'm just going to say that right now. Sorry if your name is January and you're watching this. I just couldn't take it seriously the whole time. But anyway, and her father has died. She has writer's block. She is a romance writer. And she goes to stay at this lake house that her father left her. I think it's a lake house. I don't remember. It's on water. And it turns out her next door neighbor is her old college rival from her creative writing program, who, Augustus, I don't remember his name. Oh dear. Read this a while ago, leave me alone. Anyway, so they kind of butt heads at first, and then it falls into a romance. And I actually really enjoyed this. It was fun. I liked that it was very focused on books and literature. I appreciated that. So January is a romance writer, and her love interest, it writes literary fiction. So they decide to switch genres. So he's writing a romance and she's writing a literary fiction. And yeah, it was just really fun. It was what I needed to kind of chill. I read it in like 2 days. It was a good time. 4 stars. Next up was the first of the Jane Austen July reads, and this is Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. This was a reread for me, but it's been a very long time, and I just wanted to refresh myself because it is on my exam list. This is the story of Eleanor and Mary Ann, 2 sisters who are thrown into poverty and who must get used to their new neighborhood and who are navigating relationships with men and hoping to find people to marry. Eleanor is very practical and emotionally reserved, whereas Mary Ann is extremely romantic and wears her heart on her sleeve. So I loved this. I gave it 5 stars. That was expected. Although, oh my God, I don't know if it's just I was much younger when I read this last and I found her not as insufferable. But holy crap, Marianne pissed me off so much in this book. Oh my word. And I know it's the point. I know it's the point, is that she's wrong about a lot. Like, she's a woman of 27 and a man of 30 something could not possibly actually love. Like, screw you! As I turned 29, literally today. But like, excuse me? And I know the whole point is she's wrong, and she learns she's wrong, but God, I couldn't stand her. But I still did love the book. I love Eleanor as a character. I think she's a great heroine. And then I love Colonel Brandon, and I would have married Colonel Brandon in a heartbeat, and would never have picked Willoughby over him because Willoughby's a tool. Anyway, so next up was actually another Jane Austen July read that I hadn't originally put on my TBR for it, and I just decided, hey, I need to read some poems by this guy, and I might as well pick it up, and I can do this in like a day. So this is Favorite Poems by William Wordsworth. This was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I liked some of them. I didn't really like others. I'm not a huge Wordsworth fan, but obviously he's a very important romantic writer, and he is on my qualifying exam list for the long 19th century. I liked some of these. I like the Lucy poems quite a bit. And then there's just some other kind of long ones that I'm like, ugh. Can we move along? So yeah, these were fine, 3 stars. I'm not a huge poetry person. I've said that a million times, but it was enjoyable. All right, next up was my least favorite of the month, and this took me forever to read. I've been reading this since June. This is Cometh Up as a Flower by Rhoda Broughton. This is for my Victorian literature, or my Victorian women's popular literature list. This follows the story of Nell Lestrange, who is a very sheltered young woman who lives with her father on their crumbling estate. And she has an older sister, Dolly, who is usually off, and she doesn't like Dolly because Dolly's kind of a bitch. But yeah, and she meets this young man named Dick McGregor, and she basically falls in insta-love with him. But her sister wants her to marry Sir Hugh Lancaster, who is a much older but very wealthy gentleman who Nell just hates for no reason. I found Nell so irritating. She's very flowery in her language. It's a first-person narration. She's constantly quoting poetry and literature and just being very overly dramatic. And she just hates poor Sir Hugh for no reason, and he's actually a really nice guy. I felt so bad for him. I get it, you're in love with Dick, that's fine, but you don't need to be a jerk. I did find Dolly a very interesting character because she is kind of the main villain here. She withholds letters that Nell is sending to Dick so that he thinks she's not writing to him. She forges a letter to him from Nell to make him stop trying to contact her. And yeah, she's a jerk. She's awful, but she's super interesting. The ending of this book is what really just took me over the edge. It felt like there was no point. I'm not going to give it away because, I mean, maybe you want to read this. I don't know. I don't know why. But the ending made me so angry. I was like, what was the point of this? I did do some secondary reading on it, which made me understand it a little bit more about how Broughton is kind of pointing out how women need more education and need more opportunities, and how marrying for money is not great, and being so obsessed with social standing and all that as Dolly is not more important than finding actual happiness. But I found Nell so insufferable. I could not stand her. Oh man. And apparently in one of my secondary readings it was saying that people compared this to Jane Eyre. Excuse me? I don't know. Anyway, I gave this 2 stars. I really didn't like it, but I didn't despise it. There were some merits. I can actually see myself possibly writing about this in my dissertation, but did I enjoy it? No. All right, so next up was my 3rd Jane Austen July read, and this was Marriage by Susan Ferrier. Ferrier is a contemporary of Jane Austen. This is her first novel that was published in 1818, and I loved this. Holy crap. I gave this 4.5 stars. I had so much fun. So we start off with Lady Juliana, who is a wealthy woman, noble woman, who, against her father's wishes, marries this Scottish Highlander, and I totally forget his name. But anyway, and she gets disinherited and disowned, and she moves up to the Highlands with his family, and she realizes that she has made a mistake because she is not happy there at all. She's miserable. She's very vapid and frankly awful. She's awful. She's super funny, but she's awful. And she's very scornful of her husband's family. And then she has twin daughters, one of whom is Mary, and Mary is sickly as a child, so she literally just gives Mary away to her sister-in-law. And then Mary grows up. Lady Juliana and her husband and her remaining daughter move back down to Bath, I think it is. Yes, it is. And then Mary is unwell, so she is sent down to Bath for her health to stay with her mother, and it has a coming of age narrative. She falls in love, the usual. People propose to her. This was great. I loved it so much. Ferrier's hilarious. So the reason it's not a 5-star is because there were a few points that were major to the story, to do with Mary and her love interest actually getting together and having moments that Ferrier doesn't describe at all. She just gives them a few sentences and then we're done. Whereas there are pages and pages of just conversations making fun of these fashionable women. And I'm like, why couldn't we have pages and pages of these two getting together? So that kind of frustrated me, but overall, I loved this. It was so much fun. Highly recommend. All right, next up was another one for my feminist theory list. This is Imperial Leather, Race, Gender, and Sexuality in the Colonial Contest by Anne McClintock. I gave this 4 stars. It's fantastic. So it looks at, obviously, race, gender, and sexuality, as well as class in Imperial Britain and its colonies, so in India and places like that. And I just found this super interesting. There are a few chapters where I kind of got bored, but overall it was really good. McClintock has some excellent readings of several important books that are actually on my lists, including Story of an African Farm and Rudyard Kipling's Kim. So yeah, I thought this was great. It was super helpful. 4 stars. And then last was my final read for Jane Austen July. This is Waverley by Sir Walter Scott. Sir Walter Scott was an extremely popular novelist and poet, actually, in the early 19th century. So Jane Austen loved him. Everybody kind of loved him. This was his first novel. It focuses on Edward Waverley, who is an English soldier during the I don't know how this is actually pronounced, and I probably should have Googled it, but I didn't. Jacobite uprising. So basically, the English crown was given over to George Hanover because he was a Protestant, even though there were closer relations to the predecessor in the Stuart family, but they were Catholic. So Prince Charles Edward is trying to gain back his throne, and Edward Waverley is sent to fight in King George's army, and he's sent up to Scotland, and he ends up kind of torn between the two sides because he makes a lot of friends with people who are supporting Prince Charles Edward, and he falls in love. There's romance. This was good. I gave it 3 stars. Some of the writing was just very long and kind of dense. I'm also not huge on war stories. It just doesn't interest me that much. But there were parts that I really loved. There's a scene toward the end involving Fergus MacIvor that I thought was such a powerful scene. Like, almost made me cry type deal. And I really enjoyed the character of Flora MacIvor. I thought she was very interesting, as well as Rose Bradwardine. I don't know how to pronounce her name. Ugh. But this is considered one of the first historical novels, so it was really interesting. It was on my long 19th century list, and it worked for Jane Austen July. So I'm glad I read it. I probably won't reread it. It's definitely not a favorite, but it was good. 3 stars. All right, so that is it for my July wrap-up. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you read any of these? What did you think? What did you read in July? It has been great chatting with you all. I will see you soon. Bye.